Thank you, active self-protection subscribers, for joining us here today at Firearms Legal Protection. We appreciate you coming over to hear our legal analysis of the Lakeland shooting. So let's get into that right away. First, this will be a case that's very difficult to defend. Regardless of which attorney you may have, there are some takeaways that you can look at this, but one of the things that we always look at is we have to look at the law and what starts us out. If you look at Florida law, and that's under their statute 776.012, it's subsection 2, you're talking about when a person can use deadly force. And I'm just going to read it here. That's what I'm kind of looking off to my right. If a person reasonably believes that using or threatening the use, and in Florida, obviously, you can threaten the use of lethal force, is necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm of yourself or someone else. The interesting thing about this is you look at this video, Mr. Lopez, and that's the gentleman that was shot, and Mr. Michael Dunn, that was the gentleman that did the shooting. He's the co-owner of the business. If you look at this, this really came down to that key word that most people look at in the statute, and that word is imminent. If you look at this video, it's approximately 50 seconds long. The question you have to ask at the time of the shooting, was Mr. Dunn in imminent fear of death or great bodily harm to himself or someone else? As you look at the video again, the first 19 seconds, there's nothing on the video. We don't know what happened at that point. All we know is there was two people. One person had a gun, it's clearly seen, and that's Mr. Dunn. And you also see Mr. Lopez, what appears to be trying to walk out of the store, and Mr. Dunn stopping him. Now again, not knowing how short, how wide, how long those aisles are, all we can determine at that point, based upon what I can see, is Mr. Dunn is walking kind of with his back towards the door. Tells me he's kind of in somewhat of a position of trying to stop Mr. Lopez from leaving that particular establishment. Now, if you look closely, when it's about 21 seconds, you'll notice something that's very interesting. There's space between Mr. Lopez and Mr. Dunn. And some of you may be saying, well, why are you looking at it second by second, frame by frame? Because, quite honestly, that is exactly what a prosecutor and criminal defense attorney is going to do should this case go to trial. But as you pursue it, and you will see, this whole case comes down to 21-second mark to the 24-second mark. And what do we see happening at that point? We see Mr. Lopez attempting to leave the store, and we see Mr. Dunn reach out and try and grab him and pull him back in. At the point Mr. Lopez attempts to exit the store, right around the 22-second mark of this videotape, you see Mr. Dunn shoot him. And the question you have to ask yourself, was Mr. Dunn at that particular moment in imminent fear, and I'm looking at the statute, of death or great bodily harm to himself or another person? Or, and this is under Florida statute, which is has a little twist to it, or to prevent the imminent commission of a forcible felony. So at that point, Mr. Dunn has three outs. Was he an imminent threat of imminent death or great bodily harm to himself? And most people would say no. What about to others? Well, we don't see anybody else around at that point, so that would be no. The only other option he may have is what's called, under Florida law, the imminent commission of a forcible felony. I'm just going to click over here. And if you look at that, that's under their statute 776.08. If you take a look at that particular statute, it talks about murder, manslaughter, sexual battery. Also in there is aggravated assault and robbery. So, is stealing a hatchet robbery? Absolutely. What about aggravated assault? We don't know what was said because we don't have audio on this particular video. We don't know what was done prior to the few seconds that we saw. But what we do know, we still have to go back and say, was this imminent? Under most state laws, and again, I'm not specifically speaking of Florida here, but most state laws, you can use reasonable force. Again, I'm stressing the word reasonable force in order to make sure that someone, if you own a shop, doesn't shoplift or leave. The question you have to ask yourself is, was this reasonable force? Someone using a handgun to stop someone from walking out of their store who potentially just committed a robbery. I would have to say any attorney trying this case would have a tough, criminal attorney of course, trying this case would have a very difficult time reaching a resolution of not guilty in this matter. It may not be as cut and dry as you think. It looks like Mr. Dunn may have that option on his side of a forcible felony under Florida law. But again, it will depend on how well his attorneys argue for him. My advice, ladies and gentlemen, if you're in a situation like this, it's not worth your life. And what do I mean your life? We've got 2 lives that have been changed forever. Mr. Lopez is gone. His life is over. Mr. Dunn will spend hundreds of thousands of dollars defending himself. There'll probably be a civil suit following that. He may end up going to prison potentially for the rest of his life because, again, of that moment in time. For him, that moment in time was between 21 and 24 seconds on that particular videotape that we've attached here. So, again, ladies and gentlemen, think about that before you use lethal force. Is there another way out? Is it imminent? And do you meet all the qualifications under that particular statute? For more information about this and other ways to protect yourself, please click on our link below and check out Firearms Legal Protection, because we want to be there for you for the fight after the fight. Thank you very much, and a special thanks to all of the ASP Active Self-Protection members for subscribing and watching us today.